5 pounds of mushrooms for 12 bucks.
Starting a batch of beef stroganoff, so prepping the ingredients, I need 56 ounces of mushrooms. So my plan is I'm just going to cut them in half and then chop them or slice them. I don't want little chopped pieces. All right, so I got 56 ounces of chopped mushrooms, which is about 1,590 grams. 6 cups of chopped onions, or about this many grams of onion. This is a chunk of thin sliced beef from Chef's Store. All I have to do is cut it up into smaller pieces. The one, it's already sliced this direction. I just need to cross cut it into smaller pieces and it'll be ready. So I need 6 pounds of this for this recipe, and this is just under 10 pounds. So we'll get this started, get the 6 pounds that I need. Beef stroganoff. So we got all the beef stroganoff taken care of. Now we just need to add the 3 cups of sour cream and mix that in, and everything will be in there. And it's probably a sin to even suggest it, and we're not doing it this time, but I kind of like green beans in mine. And pasta plates, because it's pasta. Want that, and then sour cream? What do you think?
Perfect.
It does look good. Oh, you want cheese first?
Yeah. Mixing it.
And it looks like there could be enough pasta for either somebody's lunch tomorrow, and then a blob of sour cream added. So we're gonna pre-freeze some of this. Put about a ½ pound in each side. And I'm going to use a little bit of non-stick cooking spray to help make sure it comes out. And just put a ½ pound on each side. Give it a little bit of a shake to level it out. That's ready for the freezer for pre-freezing. All right, now without the dividers, put a pound in that pan. And I should have mentioned there's not as much in here anymore because we had it for dinner and saved out enough for tomorrow's lunch and dinner. But if you're going to cook, you might as well cook big batches and then freeze dry a bunch. Okay, and on that, I'm adding the little rod we made for the thermometer. So, oops, got to remember to spray it also with a little bit of the spray so that it will come out easily. I forgot that the first time and had to use pliers to get the thing out. Just kind of wiggle it in there and then putting this little piece of plastic under it to hold it up. And that should give us a pretty decent place for the thermometer to sit. So again, going to just set that on there. Take the little stainless steel rod, give it a very light coating, and tuck it in here. That batch is ready for the freezer for pre-freezing. So, got the trays are pre-cooled, and I have the pans of beef stroganoff that I haven't depanned yet. Usually these would have already been depanned and sitting in Ziplocs, but I never got around to it. So we'll pop them out and get them on the pans now. I already have the tare weights for each pan. Push out the edges. Okay, oh, piece of parchment, and get rid of the ice. take the little plastic piece off and a little placeholder for the thermometer. I'll wait for that at the last moment so I can make sure I find the hole to put the thermometer in. And I don't need to fill them all the way because I only have 8 and this would hold 10. So I can leave a couple of spaces empty. Now, the fact that I only have 8 means I only need 2 full blocks worth on each. So the half blocks I really didn't need. I thought I was going to put other things on the pans like the pasta, but I never made it yet. I guess I could get the weights at the end for all of them, so I'll come back for those. Okay, it's been chilling for 2 hours. Wow, time flies when you blow it off. Don't get over there and take care of it. So my sister's machine has been cooling for 2 hours because she started it for herself, but she didn't know exactly what she was going to put in there. So I said, hey, can I use it for some of my stuff? And so I'm going to put the Stroganoff in hers. It says 18 degrees. The thermometer alongside the barrel says negative 30 some. She has one up on top in the back and it says negative 15 or so already, 10. So it's plenty cold. It's just that the newer ones don't allow the shelf spaces to get as cold until you get the stuff in there and then go to the next part of the cycle. It actually turns the heaters on for short amounts of time to prevent it from getting as cold. I kind of like mine just getting colder and colder, but we'll get them in there. Starting at the top with tray 1. I did it again. Okay, so we'll get that closed up and get to continue, so it'll continue freezing. We'll double check the drain valve, make sure it's closed. It is. I'll turn on the fan for her vacuum pump. And somebody asked me recently, why do we have it elevated? And it has nothing to do with really the elevation. It has to do with the way this is constructed. It's blowing the air for the cooling unit, so the warm air, out through the bottom. So we didn't want to set this right in that hot air stream. So we simply lifted it up and then made a tunnel under it so that it can blow straight through and not warm this up. Okay, so we'll be back on this one in about 2 days. Yeah, the thing that got me is I reached on top to put the disc in. So we're over at my sister's and it has been in the freezing for 4 hours and 23 minutes because when you jump the cycle it stops keeping track of the original. So I think it was on for 2 hours before I loaded it, so it's about 6.5 hours total, I think. It's showing negative 20 on the display. Now, I haven't finished the disc for hers, and you can see just all this condensation on her door. It's really quite a lot. It drips down the front. She added some paper towels and a little cutting mat thing to keep her desktop from getting wet. But I want to see in there. So her thermometer on the side says that it's more than 40 below, and the ones sitting in, or the ones that are in the food, it's about negative 32 or so in there, about negative 36 or so, looks like about negative 40, and then colder than negative 40. And she also has a thermometer on the, she also has a thermometer way in back on top. Let's see if we can see that one. Okay, come on, thermometer, there it is. So it's negative 40 on top also. Okay, so her machine really is just about cold enough, so hopefully that means it will jump to the drying cycle soon. So far, so good. Over at my sister's, checking the beef stroganoff. It's been going for almost 21 hours, and it says it's in the last hour and a quarter of the extra dry time. We have hers set for a 12-hour extra dry time for every batch. I don't believe it's ever been enough yet, even with 12 hours of extra. because the machine simply doesn't know how it's being loaded, and so it can't really assess the dryness. It's not going to be enough time. I'm going to add more time. The display is showing that it's 113 degrees, and of course that's fluctuating up and down a bit as the tray heaters turn on and off. But basically it's saying that it's that temperature, 112 right now. We'll check to see the thermometers inside. I'm going to try to zoom in on these thermometers a bit. The lighting might not be great, but maybe we can still see it. So now I can see the 4 thermometers all at the same time. So a little over 40, about 25, almost 30, and close to 70. So as I just mentioned, it's in the last hour and a quarter of the extra dry time. We've got thermometers that are not even up to 30 degrees yet. There is no chance, judging from all the times that we've tested for hundreds of batches, there is zero chance that they're dry. There's zero chance that they will be dry in an hour and a quarter. There's no reason to even check them at this point. If I didn't have the thermometers in the food, I could still do the freeze drying process. But I would also not have any idea of the temperature of the food. I would be taking them out in an hour and a quarter, I would weigh them for the dry check, and I'd put them back in. And I would find that there's going to be weight loss because it's not done. Because I have those in there, I can bypass the whole stopping it business and checking and simply add more time until those thermometers all get well above 100. It's just not even worth checking yet, because in all the times we've done it, they've never been dry under these conditions. They've never been finished. You could freeze dry something at a very low temperature or a lower temperature. It'll just take a much longer time. They're not going to be dry. So I'm going to go ahead and add more time right now. And I'm not even sure what time of day it is. I think it's like 2 o'clock. So this would be 3:30. So I'm going to go ahead and added 3 more hours. And we'll come back and check it to see if the temperature is up at that point. That would be just to get to the first step of the dry check, not to take them out. They still won't be done and ready to bag even in 4 1/4 hours or whatever time it is that the temperatures come up. That'll be the starting point for the dry check. When that happens, we'll come back and check it out. So don't go away, that'll be just a minute. I was planning on doing this tomorrow, so I'm not happy that it was fast. But these are smaller blocks. There is less of them. There was less than 8 pounds total. They're thin, there's not that much water. Doesn't take as long. We'll be back. So I'm back at my sister's machine to get them out to start the weight check on the Stroganoff sauce. I just missed the process completing, and the trays are still toasty warm, so they're perfectly safe to take out. I don't have to worry about condensation, so I don't really have to worry about any of the rest of the process. So I'll go ahead and open the drain valve. We'll get them out and check them. Okay, and as soon as the pressures are equalized, we can get it open. So tray 1, and I will be switching positions of those two and those two just like I did on mine. Yeah, it's still showing 95 degrees, so still plenty warm. And I need to block the airflow over here to make sure it doesn't mess with the scale. Tray 1, 869. Switch those two. Tray 2 is noticeably hotter. Yeah, that's about 116, so it's the thermometer's in the food and the tray itself is quite a bit hotter. 864. Tray 3, 864.
Taxi!
And tray 4, and that one's about 100, and it's definitely noticeably cooler than the others. And 870. All right, now we'll put those back in. get the drain valve closed. So with the drain valve closed, we'll get this restarted. We'll put more dry time. Continue. I did close the drain valve. I'm going to give it 2 hours now, and then I'll have to give it another at least a half hour to an hour tomorrow to rewarm these anyway, so that can be part of the dry check. Okay, so we'll be back tomorrow on this one because I'm not staying up 2 more hours to check it. So see you then. It'll be just a second. So I'm finally back to this. It's been sitting and waiting for me to rewarm it so we can get the final weight to make sure that the dry check was successful and that it's dry. It's been waiting for, I think about 13 hours now. It's early afternoon the next day. We'll rewarm it. You can see how much condensation it has because it's just been sitting here chilling without the vacuum running now. It still is holding a vacuum well. You can see the wide fat ring around there. So it's not leaking, or at least if it's leaking slowly. So it's a decent vacuum still. But when you have it cold for that long and it's just sitting there, it does get this front cold. So we'll add more dry time. And the reason I'm adding dry time versus just warming the trays is because the warm the trays will warm the trays, but it doesn't warm the food. And the thermometers inside those food, it's hard to see because of all that, but that's about negative 45, negative 48, maybe 47, negative about 50. Yeah, so the food itself is somewhere between negative 45 and negative 50. The warm tray function isn't enough. It simply doesn't do the job. If you've only missed the ending by a couple of minutes, then the warm trays is fine. And you'd be able to tell that because the temperature on the screen would be low, but the temperature in the food would still be high. It'd still be warm. Anyway, we'll come back in an hour or so and check it to make sure that it's warm, and then we'll finish the dry check to make sure that they're dry. We'll see how long it takes to get below the 2500. So just a little over 2 minutes and the pressure started to drop. So it wasn't that high to begin with in there. Okay, we'll be back. I finally made it back. It's been almost 3 hours. It's in the last 10 minutes. So we'll bypass the rest of it, get it out and check it. I had other things to do, and if you have other things to do, just let it run. Okay, so open the drain valve, and as soon as the pressures are equalized, we'll be able to get it open. Okay, starting at tray 1. And previously, this was 869. Let's see where it's at now. 867. So it went down. We had 2 hours last night and 3 hours today. We have 5 hours. So this may need a little bit more time. So we're going to check each one. There is over 250 grams of finished stuff on the trays. Oh, I forgot. I need to block this air currents because that can change the weight of them because the fan blowing under there. 863. Okay. I'm going to reweigh that first one. Yeah, 867. Tray 3. Also 863. $869. Okay. Each tray had 1 gram of loss. It has been a long time. It's been 4 or 5 hours of additional dry check time. 1 gram for each one of them is probably 100% safe. And with this type of food, I have very little doubt that it is done. With some types of foods, I'd be concerned that it still needs more time, like blueberries or citrus, blackberries. green beans, something with those seeds inside that, or those juicicles that don't want to give up their moisture. This is almost assuredly done. But I've been asked before, at what amount do you feel comfortable taking it out? If it's anything higher than 0, I don't feel comfortable. If it was late at night, I might still take them out right now. But I'm gonna go ahead and give them a couple more hours just to make sure, because I've got other things I could do for the next couple hours. It's probably 100% safe. There's about 200 grams of food on each tray, so that's only 1 gram per 100, or about 1%. And it's probably already gone now. That was probably the last time. So it should be perfectly safe to take it out now because of the long dry time, the dry check time, and only a single gram. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a couple more hours because I can right now. I'm not in any kind of rush. It's probably fine. And if I had more data on this particular food, like if I did another batch of the same food and had the same results, then I would know that this next time is safe or not. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little bit more time and then we'll take them out. So I'm going to close the drain valve and continue. And I put it at 2.5 and I can come back at 1.5. In the meantime, we'll go get some apples prepped for the next batches. I finally made it back to the beef stroganoff, and I'm not exactly sure how long it's been. It might be 3.5 or 4.5 hours, because we got started with some Fuji apples, and so I just added more time to this until I could make it back to my sister's machine. Now we'll get them out of there. It's unlikely they'll have lost any weight, so let's check them and get them bagged. So I'll use the down arrow to get past the last half hour of that. And we'll open the drain valve, let the air in. As soon as enough air gets in, the pressures will be equalized and we'll be able to open the door. Okay, tray 1. And it's still very, very toasty and no change. And that's what we want to hear, is that there's no change. So tray 2 and no change. Tray 3, no change. And finally tray 4 and also no change. I forgot my other scale that I use for bagging. Well, I'll get that. First, we'll get this turned off, so no defrost. I'll put her little defrost baffle in, and we'll wait to turn this on until we're done bagging so we don't have to listen to it. Okay, we're going to start by getting the final weights on all of these without the thermometers in them. Tray 1, oh, and get the thermometer out, of course. 859. Now we'll figure out how much needs to go in a bag, and I need to go back to my place, get the scale. It'll just take a minute or two, so don't go away. So here's pretty much the breakdown on this set. I've got the gross weight before, then I subtract the tray, and that gives me the net weight when I put it into the freeze dryer. Now I know, because I weighed it, that there was 8 pounds when it went onto the trays. So it had already lost 60, what's that, 40, 50, 60, 68 grams while freezing. And as you know, when you have stuff in the freezer and it's not covered, you start to lose water out of the food while it's in the freezer, which is why you can get freezer burn, because it's starting to dehydrate around the edges. Anyway, so I'm using 8 pounds as my number. Now, what went into the freezer is a little bit less, or into the freeze dryer was a little bit less. It was 7.85, but I'm not going to really worry about that because I'll want to rehydrate it back to what it was. After it was freeze dried, we had 800 grams total of freeze dried food for the 8 pounds. So it was 100 grams per pound afterwards. I'm going to bag it in 8 bags. So I need to label it that it started out as a pound and now it needs 353.5 grams of water back into it to get it back to that pound. We'll get some labels on bags and we'll get them started. So I've got the bags labeled, and on this set I'm adding a letter to signify that it came from my sister's machine, so when I go back through my notes I don't confuse this batch 95 to my batch 95 from 5 years ago. That would be an issue. So I have the batch number and the date it went into the freeze dryer, then what it is, and then what it weighed before freeze drying, how much water I need to put in to rehydrate it back to the same level, and then kind of how to deal with it. You know, what to do with it and how to make it work. Now, on these, I don't need to weigh these because these were pre-portioned out, so I'm simply going to use one of these blocks in each bag. Each of these blocks were 1 pound. Now, for rehydrating, if I wanted to get it precisely right, which sometimes I've done that, it would be best to weigh each block individually so that I know how much water needs to go in that block. Because the amounts of sauce and solids in here, these two are going to be a little bit different. In fact, we could probably check that. If it's not significant, it's not really an issue. Okay, so we'll get that turned on and we can compare a couple of blocks. So that's 103 grams. And so this one's probably a little bit less than that. This one's 97 grams. And that's what I mean. They're going to average out at 100 because it's 800 for the 8 sets or 8 pounds. So they're going to be a fraction high or low. And so when I rehydrate them, the one that was slightly low, it's going to end up with a few grams extra water. So it's going to be slightly liquidy or more liquid for the sauce. The other one's going to be slightly drier, but it's going to be small enough that it's going to be within the margins of error. And I always do a little bit light on the rehydration when I start anyway. Let's check another tray. This one's tray 2, and it should be a similar kinds of things where it's plus or minus a little bit. This one's 101. And this one's 97. So again, it's plus or minus a little bit, and so I'm not going to worry about it for this set. If it were really critical, I could weigh each one of them after I put them in the bag and get an exact number. But this is going to be plus or minus a couple of grams of water, and a teaspoon is 5 grams. So we're talking very small amounts. It's really going to be plus or minus a teaspoon. It's really not going to be a problem with a 1 pound block. To get these into these bags, I'm going to have to crush them up a little bit. But there's nice big chunks of mushroom, there's nice big chunks of beef. I don't want to break those down. I don't want to make it into a gravy. So I'm going to just crush it just enough to fit it into a bag. So I use the flexible cutting mat to kind of act as a giant funnel, and then I can break apart one piece at a time. Now, to keep them separate, I will move the block I'm not working on to another spot so I don't end up mixing it in there together. Okay. So and all I need is just a little bit of pressure to kind of break the sauce bits apart. So it takes very little pressure. And oh, I almost forgot about this. I am going to be adding a teaspoon of instant clear gel to each bag because this kind of sauce, once it's been frozen and then freeze dried and rehydrated, or just frozen and thawed, it doesn't get the same thickness afterwards. So by adding a little bit of instant clear gel, I'll get that thickness back to it when I rehydrate it. I almost forgot about that. So I'll add that to the bags. In fact, I guess I could do that all at the same time at the end so I don't forget anything. Anyway, so just do a light crush, being gentle with it to make sure that I don't crush up the pieces of meat or the mushrooms. I'm just trying to break the mushroom soup sauce part of it. And I've got a slightly oversized bag, so I don't need to worry about it not fitting because I've got more space than I really need. And that's on purpose so that I don't have to crush it. And then I'll kind of pat it, get any of the pieces off, and just slip it into the next one. Now you can see how that has nice big chunks in there still. And there's plenty of room for closing it, and you could add the water right to the bag, or you could pour it into a different container. We almost always pour it into a different container, and in part because we want to see it.
Yeehaw!
And you can see the big pieces of beef in there, and that's part of what I don't want to destroy that texture. So I want to keep those pieces nice and big. So by being gentle, they'll stay nice and big. And of course, using 2 of the half ones still gives me the pound. And if I had realized I wasn't going to fill up the trays, I wouldn't have had to make any half ones at all. So you could add this pretty much any time along in the process after, I mean, you could sprinkle this on before you put them in the freeze dryer. You could sprinkle it on after you take them out. You could wait until you go to use them and add this. And it's not a requirement at all. I just like my sauce to be thicker, and it's going to be thinner because of the freeze cycle. So I'm going to add a teaspoon to each bag and kind of shake it around when I close it. This just seems to work pretty well with this. And you can see I'm not scraping off the top or anything, so it's not an exact teaspoon. It's just somewhere close to a teaspoon. Now I can add the oxygen absorbers and then seal the bags. First, I'm going to go ahead and give them a little bit of a shake. I'm using the 300cc oxygen absorbers once again. I almost never mention this. I get my bags and oxygen absorbers and everything from PackFreshUSA. And people ask me, do I recommend any particular thing? Well, I've been using them for years. We've done thousands and thousands of bags. And the one time that I went somewhere else and got some bags, I ended up with thin bags that had a problem and I had to rebag. But I don't like to say I recommend them because I've never done testing to say this one's the best. I just know that it's worked for me for 6 years, but I don't have any scientific proof about any of it. Except I have tested the oxygen absorbers, and I'll be showing how we test them as we go along here soon. And I've been very happy with those also. I would say they've worked great for me. As far as telling other people what they should use, I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm going to put one in each bag, kind of tuck it down, move the bag over so that I don't forget one. And again, this was a part bag, so there's only 7 in there. So I'm going to have 1 more that I need to add. I'm going to go ahead and get these zippered shut first though. So I can kind of squeeze out any extra space at the top. Yeah, just squeezing out the extra air and then zippering them shut. These zippers are quite good. They're no substitute for heat sealing, but they do slow down some of the transmission in and out of there, you know, making the volume smaller for those couple of minutes until I get it sealed. And it does a great job on holding that area flat so it's easy to seal. Ones without the zipper, I find you're trying to struggle with closing them and getting it in the sealer at the same time. So I really like these zipper type bags. Just changing the count on this one because I'm going to be taking 1 out, so there'll be 9 left. I'll take 1 out real quick and reseal it, and that's the oxygen sensor. And you can see as soon as I open it, it starts to turn dark before I can even get that out. Now I'll get it resealed real quick. All of the oxygen absorbers that I've tested from this company have all absorbed at least twice what it says that they will. So this is a 300cc. The ones that I've tested would would absorb at least 600 cc. So the fact that I put some air in there by opening it, and now I've resealed it, I'm not worried about that because there's 9 of them in there to absorb that teeny bit of oxygen, and I know that they're oversized anyway. So I'm not worried about it for the time that I'm going to have this. Push out the extra air on that one, get it zippered shut. And now we can get them heat sealed. My sister's heat sealer is one of the Harvest Right branded ones, and it has a silicone piece underneath the heat strip, kind of the same as that silicone piece on the top, or similar. So it heats up very quickly. It's insulated. The heat strip is insulated from the metal body, so it seems to do a pretty good job now that we changed her element out. Wow, her spring is a lot harder. You have to push down on this a lot harder than you do on mine. With mine, it's very light spring. You can get a workout doing the spring on hers. Okay, it's sealed well and checking because I haven't used hers in a while. Okay, good seal. Looks great. It's high up across the top. And I've got space for 2 or 3 more tries in case I mess that up. After it goes, I wait a couple of seconds after it's done before I release it.
Taxi!
Those are all sealed and ready to shake a little bit to get that instant clear gel distributed and to be put on the shelf for long-term storage. I should probably show those shelves again and maybe go over how we store things. All right, so that's it for that one. We'll be back with the next thing, which we're going to do more apples.